Okay, I've got a question for you. How can a game be the best-selling game of the year so far, and the 4th highest rated game of the year critically, and also sit at 15% positive reviews in Steam? That's a goofy situation, and it's happening to Monster Hunter Wilds, which in a way is a paradox, because by any normal measure, it's a Game of the Year contender. Just, not by a little metric called player satisfaction. So it's bizarre, and it does paint a bit of a picture for the future, because here's what's going on. The PC gaming audience is more and more important. We actually make up so many sales that we cannot be ignored. But you guys know how it's been, right? For years and years and years, we get shitty ports, a lot of bullshit, publishers just don't take us seriously. But now what's changed is they have to take us seriously, because we're worth a shitload of money. I've also got something to tell you about. Traveling to the US for Epic Universe's opening was awesome, but it did mean dealing with something that's not fun, and that's roaming charges. Just that this time I didn't have to deal with them because of today's sponsor, Saley, who saved me a fortune. They are an eSIM provider from the creators of NordVPN, and they give you local data rates without the hassle of physical SIM cards. It is so easy. You just download the app, you pick your destination from over 200 countries, choose a data plan, and that's basically it. You'll be connected to the internet the moment you land. You won't be paying stupid roaming rates or any of that stuff. And also it means no more hunting around for SIM vendors at airports, no keeping track of tiny cards or getting scammed by dodgy stuff. It just works. It's so instant, it's so quick. And in my example, I just went with a USA plan, which was significantly cheaper than what my carrier wanted for roaming. And the setup literally took like 3 minutes. You just install the eSIM once and there you go. It works globally. And if you're planning to hit multiple countries, you can get a regional plan and save even more money. And of course, you keep your regular number for calls and text while you're then using Saley for data. Plus, they've also got built-in security features for safer browsing when you're away. So basically, it's awesome. And right now at saley.com/BellularNews, you'll be getting a exclusive 15% off with code BellularNews. And all you need to do is download the Saley app or just head to saley.com/BellularNews. Okay, last time we talked about Monster Hunter Wilds, it was of Capcom's gamble paying off. And look, it did pay off. But a month has passed since then, and over that month, a lot of sentiment has changed. Now, so you understand, here's the situation. Monster Hunter Wilds had to deliver just over half of Capcom's yearly revenue target. Now, that obviously was a pretty tall order, but it did end up succeeding. Not only that, it actually vastly surpassed its targets. Now, at the launch, right, more than half of US sales were on Steam. And that kind of means that without the simultaneous PC and console release, this game would not have succeeded the same way, certainly not financially. Now, over on console, it's a success, but on PC, the launch was really shit. The performance issues did make things messy, and that does kind of make sense. I mean, think about it. If you're optimizing for only 2 consoles, that is relatively straightforward compared to getting consistent performance across every PC build that is possible. It's not an impossible task. Loads of companies have well-optimized games in PC, but it requires effort, investment, and time. Now here's the thing, Capcom did not have time. They needed this game to be out for long enough to hit their financial year targets. So the ideal world where console release would happen and then PC would come out when it's ready, when it's a good product worthy of being sold. That obviously didn't happen. It couldn't happen. And the reason why is Capcom's financial targets. Now obviously, they did set them for themselves. But here's the thing. They basically have had a story of 10 years of 10% growth a year. And if memory serves, if they didn't hit it this year, they would have broken like a 10-year streak. That would have been real bad for their investor narrative and all that stuff that big companies do actually care about. So essentially, it was a classic example of misaligned incentives. Their incentives were not aligned with ours. That was always going to come to a head in the long run, and now, thankfully, that has actually happened. Take a look at this graph. It's kind of lovely. We see a very clear trend where at launch, there's a 60-40 split, and that stays proportionally 60 to 70% positive as the updates and fixes roll out. But then, as May ends, clearly something changes. So here's how we get there. April's first big title update added a new monster, new endgame features, updates to the social hub area, and some other minor things. Then, May's end brought the Street Fighter collaboration complete with Akuma's weapon. So basically, content was coming, but the core game, the thing that people really cared about, was not changing. Then the month of June hits, and that is when the real shift happens. And man, what a shift it is. There's over 11,000 user reviews in the last 30 days, of which only 15% are positive. The vast majority are negative, and people are rightly pissed. There's a few reasons why, I'll summarize them. So, first up, Capcom took a harsher line in mods in early June where they suspended players who were using mods to access gear and cosmetics that were not yet released to the public. Which, is understandable, but it's really not like Capcom were sort of, standing on firm ground with this game. So yes, that pissed off some people. Second then, a bug with shader compilation caused CPU load to spike big time during gameplay, and Capcom's response was to just tell players to manually delete shader files until the next patch. Which is a solution, but it's not really a fix, and it's just frustrating. And then third, it's less something that Capcom did, and it's more just the situation of this game becoming obvious, because by now, so few people remained compared to what you would have expected. Prior Monster Hunter games had more players, and you basically see that per the Steam charts, only the most dedicated people are left. And through all of this time, negative reviews about performance kept on coming. And again, justifiably, rightly so. The next big update then is the announcement of Title Update 2 on the 10th of June, and it's promising a release by the end of June. And basically, there will be more endgame monster tiers, quality of life and balance changes, and performance improvements, especially on the Steam version. That means changes to VRAM usage to limit crashes, promises of enhanced texture streaming, and other things that are nice. But there is a problem. I mean, if those were enough to make people happy, you would have seen it in the Steam reviews, but we don't. And that's because these just weren't fixes in the truest sense, at least in the audience's mind. Essentially, more content and some nice but not super core fixes happening in the context of deep underlying problems within the game that are not being fixed. And what this led to is a classic snowball, because once the negatives started to outweigh the positives to a sort of critical mass, it just snowballed. People decided to hop in and leave negative reviews because by now it was obvious to everyone that Capcom had dropped the ball and that there was no way they'd be able to just brush that shitty launch under the rug and have us all forget. Oh no, people remember. Alright, PC audiences, we are used to being heard. Steam's a big platform, it's got reviews, and those tools are often something that drives change. Because if changes don't happen, negative reviews in theory should slow down sales. At least in theory. It often does work, it can kill an indie game, but if you take a look at Call of Duty, well, sometimes, negative reviews will not change a developer's mind. In this case though, let's talk about Wilds and break the criticism into two camps. There's artistic and there's technical. And Wilds has got both. As for artistic problems, sometimes those do or do not get updates. Maybe a dev has got a different vision from a player. An example of that changing though is say Helldivers 2. Essentially, the devs really wanted a harder rock, paper, scissors with weapon balancing. Players just wanted more of a fun power fantasy, and ultimately the devs decided to agree with the players, and it did end up working out. So this is a game that does have that type of artistic, of design criticism. But then there's the technical, and that's where Capcom honestly are fucked in how they've dealt with things. Now obviously PC is hard, we've all heard the meme of works in my machine, but here's the reality of things with this game. Hundreds of QA staff before launch looked at this, but then, well, that turned into thousands and thousands and thousands of players with loads of different configurations. That is exponentially more, and players are good at finding problems. But as PC gamers, we do appreciate that PC is harder than consoles, so launch issues, if they're dealt with promptly, I think can be broadly accepted by people, but only if they are dealt with promptly. That's not happened. It's only got worse over time. We're nearly 4 months post-launch. We're past at least one paid DLC. And what's happening in this front? Capcom is still recommending that users delete files manually to fix shader compilation. The impression is that Capcom do not care, that they got their money from a messy launch to hit their big financial goal, and that now they don't give a shit. And the ultimate endpoint of that is accusations of it being a dead game. Now the funny thing is, as much as that narrative has set in, and there's a lot of truth in it, if you go and look on Steam, you do actually see Capcom are literally discussing Steam-specific fixes in patch notes and in dev diaries. But that's obviously not working. That's not solving the broader issue, and what's far worse is that this is beginning to look like a pattern. Multiple reviews call out poor performance compared to Monster Hunter World of course, 2018. Do you know what's funny? That game actually launched with mostly negative reviews in Steam. Not a 60-40 split, mostly negative. But then what happened? Well, it immediately rallied. It now has got near universally positive reviews, and that all followed as Capcom fixed up the PC port, and they brought the game in line with console. And for a while, it looked like a genuine Capcom redemption. They had good PC ports, good performance. But then Dragon's Dogma 2 happened. That was in March 2024. It had heaps and heaps of problems, and one of the most egregious, the town performance stuff. The fixes didn't arrive until June, which was 3 months later. Wider performance fixes then came in September, which was 6 months after launch. That's insane. And there's been no changes since. And that does mean the cries of "this has been abandoned by the devs" are actually not hyperbole. Does actually ring out. It does make sense. And the general understanding then is that without hardware from recent years, you'll just have a shit time. And one that you shouldn't really have. The idea basically being that if it wasn't for NVIDIA frame generation making up for these shitty launches and, evidently devs and publishers not treating things with the respect that they should be treated with, that we'd just be screwed. But hey, Jensen is here with his frame gen and we're all safe. Which is a grim reality for us to be in, where now we're trying to pad our frame rates with fake frames. Anyway, people basically can look at this and see the same pattern with Monster Hunter Wilds. Now, many people are blaming the RE engine because it's, well, sort of connective tissue between all of these things. Essentially, the theory is that only Capcom's open world games have got these sorts of problems. And I think that's fairly logical based on the evidence. But as long as you ignore one thing. The games run fine on console comparatively, which basically means that it's likely PC-specific optimization stuff. The sort of thing where you need more time, more resources, more energy. And oh, boo-hoo, poor Capcom, who got over 50% of their American sales from the Steam version. By now, it is simply an undeniable pattern of behavior from this publisher. And of course, you then look at, say, Resident Evil Requiem and think, oh, well, it'll probably be like what has came before. A bit shit. All of this has happened before, all of this will happen again. Once upon a time, back in the 2010s, Capcom had a reputation, one of incredibly shoddy PC ports. But they overcame that. They did good, and now PC releases are making up more than half of their sales, at least that stat in America for one of their most successful games ever. And they earned that. They earned those sales by putting out great games that people enjoy. That's why over 1 million people have wishlisted Resident Evil Requiem across all the different platforms. It's now the 29th most wishlisted game in Steam, 8 months before launch. But that's also why people worry. Think about it. Capcom gets that much Steam traction, even in spite of their last 2 releases being just disrespectful shit shows. Both not only having rough launches, but also bad post-launch support for the PC platform. And that means it feels like they are taking PC for granted. They want the money, but they don't seem to want to do the work that earns that money. And that's what these reviews are really about. It goes deeper than just this one game. Whenever I said that Capcom pulled a dirty trick, well, I think that's been proven pretty right as times went on. Capcom, it feels like you'll happily benefit from us, but that you're not willing to actually invest in our concerns and actually treat us with the respect that I think a customer deserves. And I have a perfect contrast, the ultimate way that you actually know the audience matters. PlayStation basically scared themselves shitless whenever Concord went the way that it did. Because of that, they've changed a hell of a lot. So ultimately, money, our money, talks. Whenever people don't show up, these companies are forced to change. It is not happening with Capcom thus far. Maybe it will in the future, and if you want to see how it impacted Sony, watch this video next.